going to go ahead and hit record. You will just need to click accept in order to continue. And this is for our colleagues who are unable to make it with us here this morning. I'm really thrilled to introduce this session and our amazing set of panelists that we have today. We have Emma Swift, Laura Canner, Shannon Gerber, and Susanna Marcucci, who are going to be leading the session, and I'll let them give bigger introductions here in just a moment. I just wanted to give you a few Zoom tips, and I have a special request for all of you to make your name into one of the breakout room sessions that we're going to be leading later this afternoon. So the first thing that I ask everybody to do is go under the participants section, hover over your name and click more, and then you'll rename yourself. And if you can rename yourself to your first name and then add in whichever breakout room you want to choose for later on in the session. So you can just write technology, student, office, or work life, and that will help us put you into a breakout room. So please do that now, and that way it'll be very helpful for us throughout the session, and I'll remind you to do that through chat. I also wanted to let you know that you've all been muted, but we'll unmute you during the Q&A session and during the breakout rooms, but just to help keep the background noise down. But the chat is open, so we encourage you to throw your questions in there throughout chat, and we will moderate that a little bit later. And we would love to see your faces. It's much more engaging to not just talk to each other. So if you would like to turn on your camera, we would love to see you. And again, this is the final plug right now to rename yourself for your breakout room. So that'll be helpful for us in the end. All right, I'm going to hand it over to our panelists and a nice warm welcome to them.
Hi everyone, I am going to share my screen and pull up our slides. All right, so welcome to our session. We've gathered together a panel of folks from all different types of institutions. We have Shannon Gerber from Northeastern, Laura Canner from Lesley. I'm from Clark, I'm Susanna Marcucci, and Emma Swift from University of Vermont. So to start things off today, before we launch into the struggles that we've had with adjusting to remote work and some of the tips that we want to share with you, I do just want to pull up a quick poll, and we'd love to kind of poll the room and see how you felt about your transition to remote work. So have you been very successful, somewhat successful, or has it been a train wreck? That's perfectly okay. I think we've all had days that were a train wreck for sure. Just a couple more folks. Okay, so it looks like we have most people in the somewhat successful, which means some things have worked, some things haven't. And I think that's where a lot of us fall. And then it's awesome to see some who have had very successful transitions. So I'm hoping you'll join us for the breakout session at 12 o'clock to share your experiences. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today, we'll introduce our institutions just to give some context and why we're all doing things a little bit differently in our offices. And then we divided up the challenges of the remote office into 4 categories. So using technology and logistical challenges, student support and communication, office support and communication, working in a team from a distance, and then that really tricky concept of work-life balance. We're hopefully going to get through all these slides in about 50 minutes and have about 10 minutes for Q&A, which we'll do through the chat. And then there's the optional breakout rooms at the end of the session that we would love for you to join. Feel free to bring your lunch to that. We'll just be moderating a more in-depth discussion for those of you that are able to stay with us. I'm going to hand it over to you, Shannon, to talk about Northeastern.
Great, thank you. Hi, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Shannon Gerber. I'm an Associate Director at the Office of Global Services in Northeastern. Currently, we have 15,672, very exact number, F1 students. Just over 5,000 of those are on OPT. We have a much smaller J population. Those were last week's numbers. As you know, it's constantly changing. We have 35 staff members across multiple campus locations. So we're East Coast, West Coast. We have colleagues in our new offices in Canada. So we're kind of all over the place. This fall, we have a hybrid model called Hybrid NU Flex. And it's a method of course delivery that allows students to be in person, sometimes in person, sometimes remote, or all remote. And we're starting to phase staff back into the office this week, actually, with 5 or 6 people per day at a time, with student services remaining online. So just people in the office for emergencies, and we'll keep all advising and all requests online to start. So that's where we're at right now.
Hi, I am Laura Canner. I am from Lesley University. I am the Director of International Student Advising, and we have a very small population. We have about 137 current or new students, 21 students on post-completion OPT, and I am a single person office. Before we went online for the spring semester, I was a fully paper-based office. And so that has been one thing that's been a really big adjustment for me. For fall 2020, we are going to be mostly virtual. So we're going to have some studio spaces available for some select fine art students who need access to like the ceramic studio or to our cinematography studio. And we will have one certificate program that will have an optional 5-week in-person program. Other than that, we will be fully virtual. All campus services will be virtual, and our dormitories are closed for the semester, and I will be working from home for at least until the end of the year.
Again, I'm Susanna Marcucci. I'm the Director of the International Students and Scholars Office at Clark University. I joined Clark in January of this year, so it's been a wild ride for me to be at a new institution in a new director role and transitioning my office in the year of COVID. So we have just over 900 students enrolled as of last fall, 117 on OPT, and then a small scholar population. We do everything in our office, including H-1B applications for faculty. So we can do all the immigration stuff in one office. We have 4 full-time staff members, and then we really do rely on our student staff as well. When we went remote, we were in the process of transitioning from a homegrown paperless office to a vendor-based platform, Teradata. So I was leading that transition as well, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. This fall, Clark, we're open. Students are back in the dormitories. We're offering a hybrid model of instruction, so faculty were able to select if they wanted to teach in person or remote, or offer a hybrid type course. And we also are making complete online instruction available for students who were not able to come back to campus for this fall. We don't have graduate student housing this fall, but we do have undergraduate student housing and dining services open. We as an institution have been encouraged to continue working from home if we're able to do our jobs, and we made the decision to keep the ISSO closed and providing just 100% remote services. And part of that was just because of the building that we're located in is not conducive really to being able to social distance and have students coming in and out. So that's where we're at.
Hi everyone, my name is Emma Swift. I'm the Associate Director in the Office of International Education at the University of Vermont. Our office is an inbound, outbound office, so we do study abroad as well. But my primary area is our inbound student and scholar population. And so we have, you know, a little under 700 students, or I guess a little over 700 if you're including our OPTers, and 150 or so scholars and employees who are processed by our team. Our ISSES, which is Employee Services team, is 4.5 full-time equivalent advisors. And administrative support, though we're part of the pandemic, is that we've had significant staffing reductions in the form of not filling temp positions. And so we'll be down a bunch of staff people as we go into this coming year. So that's kind of a space where we're thinking about how do we continue to evolve this work from home. We were paperless pre-pandemic. We are a synopsis school. And so fall 2020, UVM is on a hybrid model, but we're offering 4 different modes or modalities, I guess, of instruction. So in-person, hybrid, online, and then remote is online courses, but it's synchronous versus online, which is asynchronous. Students had the option of selecting an at-home version for the semester where they would not be physically in Burlington. About 10% of our student body selected that. So we have 90% of our students kind of converging on Burlington again. Today is the first day of move-in for students who didn't complete quarantine on campus. And so our residential life staff is busy. So we're housing students, we're offering dining. Student support offices are expected to be open, but most advising, or really all advising, is happening virtually. And so not dissimilar to what Northeastern is doing, we have kind of a skeletal office staff who will be there to essentially advise people on how to schedule an appointment to meet with someone via Microsoft Teams, open for picking up documents, but not open for travel signatures, for example. And so we're rotating our staffing through the office so that people are physically in there, but really everything else is happening through Teams.
Okay, so we're going to talk about technology and logistics.
Oh, I'm going to start by talking about how I went paperless very, very quickly and on a $0 budget. And I think that this was a difficult pivot for me, and I want to be really upfront that this was an enormous challenge of thinking of how I was going to organize my students. And I wanted to share some of my thought process and some of my concrete actions. One thing that really helped me in this process was to talk it through with somebody else. I am a single person office, but I had an intern this summer. And whenever I have an intern, one of the first things that I do is I go over the anatomy of a file, what we save about a student and where we put it. And having that conversation helped me think about, okay, if I'm going to save it online, this is how I'm going to save it. One of my big roadblocks is that I thought, wow, I really don't want to create 150 file folders. That's going to take a lot of time. And I looked for resources that could help me do this. And this is something that you can do in Excel. You can batch create file folders. And it's worth like Googling solutions for the problems that you're thinking of, for those roadblocks that come in front of you. And then think what resources you have already. Do you have SharePoint? That's where I'm hosting all of my student files right now. Do you have Qualtrics so that you can turn all of your forms into digital forms, or dynamic forms, or Google Forms, which is free for everybody? And I want to say that I was not perfect about this, especially right in the beginning. For all of March and April, I actually just saved all documents to the desktop of my computer because we were in a crisis. And I needed to still be creating documents, and I didn't have any place for them to go. And I have spent a little bit of time here and there over the past few months correcting that and making sure that everything is saved correctly. And thinking deeply about, how do I save things? What's my file naming convention for any specific file? What exactly am I saving? What's the easiest format to put them in? How do I keep notes about students when I'm going digital? And to kind of play around with it. I think a benefit to being a single person office is that if I think of something, I can implement it. But I found it really helpful to get feedback on what I'm doing. And so I reached out to our academic advising center, which went paperless a little bit before the pandemic, to ask them, how are they making it work? How do they keep notes on files? And just to hear has been very, very, very helpful in thinking about how I move forward, how I keep good records, how I make sure that things are organized and can stay organized after the pandemic too.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about scheduling appointments, but we've been using Calendly for a while now, and many of you have heard me wax poetic about it. I really love the program. It's made our scheduling a lot easier, and it's cheap. It's basically a tool that allows students to and scholars to schedule their own appointments. And we set all the parameters in the background, and it really made a huge difference for us as we transitioned to remote work, because if back when we had phone calls coming in, it would have meant transferring a call, looking at calendars, and we didn't have access to phones really. We were using a single Google Voice line, but the university wasn't set up to be able to transfer our direct lines to cell phones, for example. And so I'd really encourage you, if you're not using some sort of online scheduling tool, to look into it. Calendly is what we use. There are a lot of great options out there. We started using it in slightly different ways after we shut down though. So for example, normally Monday through Friday from 1 to 4, we had walk-in hours, and that wasn't something we were able to do anymore since we weren't physically in the office. And I know that some schools have done kind of walk-in hours with kind of a waiting room in Zoom. What we did instead was through Calendly, we set up an option to schedule 15-minute same-day appointments. And so they really replicated the same kind of time frame. Our walk-ins are limited to 15 minutes with an advisor. They are dynamic in that students could schedule them up to 30 minutes in advance as long as the advisor's calendar was free. But they've also been really great in allowing us to push kind of adapted communication to students. So we were able to make a switch quickly to say on all of the appointments, these take place via Microsoft Teams. And so it's been a really amazing saving grace for us, frankly. So it costs it's like $8, about $100 a year per person who's using Calendly. And as I mentioned before, we've had some significant staffing cuts. Our budget is cut by about 25% through a range of things, and that includes all of our administrative staff will be gone come January because of some people taking early retirement and positions not being refilled. And for $400 a year, our ISSS advising team can all get appointments scheduled automatically. And so that's been a really amazing piece for us in working remotely.
So one big challenge for us, and I think any institution, is how to manage student requests efficiently when suddenly no one can come into the office anymore. Like I said, we were paperless before I arrived at Clark, but so we had electronic student files, but we had requests coming in for OPT, CPT, program extensions, leaves of absence from all different formats. So some of them were our forms that we managed through Qualtrics. Other forms were paper-based and would come to us from other departments. Just as an example, for CPT, we had a different process for undergraduates and for every graduate school. So it was very confusing. So having Teradata, that was really the first benefit we saw. Of course, Teradata is not an option for every school and every budget, but it helped us centralize all of our requests that students were sending in and made it much easier for us to efficiently process and get things back to students in a timely manner, which for us is 5 business days. The only challenge, and I would say this for anyone considering changing how you're doing your processes in your office, is communicating those changes to other stakeholders on campus, so both students and other departments. So we had to do a lot of outreach and a little bit of massaging to change how we were doing things. And that really made a big difference, was actually scheduling meetings, just 30-minute meetings with some of the other departments on campus, and showing them how students were going to experience this process and what they needed to do and what it meant, for example, for an academic advisor to get a CPT reference request and how to fill that out. So there was a lot of work up front to change our process, but now it's been working really, really smoothly. We're still making tweaks, but I would say overall it's been really smooth, and students are pretty satisfied with the speed that they're getting their documents.
So I'm just going to talk a little bit about targeted communication and targeted messaging. To be upfront, Northeastern is a Synopsys school, so there are things that we can do with Synopsys that you might find intimidating, but there are ways to do it without Synopsys for sure. As you know, we've had to communicate quite a bit with students about lots of different things, whether it be moving out of your dorm or, you know, COVID response, how we're going to be doing classes, or our favoriteest day of the year, July 6th, and everything that happened on July 6th, and then everything that was taken back 2 weeks later. So there's lots of communication that we've had to do. So I would suggest that everybody think about what are the different groups of students that you're communicating to that might have slightly different messaging. Who are your stakeholders? It could be initial students, active students, OPT students, 3 different buckets. Transfer students could be a completely different bucket that has different needs, different questions. So I would suggest thinking through like what almost, you know, mailing lists you could create, and what is different about each group. Do these groups actually need separate messaging, or is the messaging basically the same? Can you send one message that's clear for everybody? If you can't, then you might want to break them out into different buckets. And then if you create lists for these groups, you can mass message in a number of different ways. We use Synopsys where we can run a report. So we could get down to the nitty gritty, even like we want F1 students who started in 2019, who are in the College of Engineering and have this major. You know, we could get really down to the nitty gritty, but that's not always needed. You can also use something like Constant Contact, or even if you have a small population, just a mail merge, just something like real basic to be able to email out to these populations. I think if you think through targeted communication, it might be more work on the front end, but it's going to be less work clearing up misunderstandings or answering questions on the back end. So we found that really helpful.
Okay, lots of challenges and opportunities with student support and communication remotely. I come from student affairs, my role before clerk. I was housed in student affairs, so I came to my role at Clark with a real philosophy of student support, embracing the whole student, and I bring that approach to my advising and building connections with students, especially when they have complex issues. How do you do that on video? How do you advise with empathy from far away? So that was a big challenge for me. What I did right away was sort of lower the bar of who could get a meeting with me, and meet with students, do it by video chat if they were comfortable doing that. I was always happy to share my face with students. I think that's really important, and really trying to foster that connection, asking some questions to get the conversation going, because it can be very awkward. You know, how's your summer going? What's going on? How's your family back home? Are they dealing with COVID? You know, and trying to build that rapport has been really helpful and has been a good approach for me in helping students when they have a lot of issues. There were a lot of students with financial concerns because they lost their on-campus jobs that were really sustaining them with their living expenses. They no longer had that option. So, you know, being able to just connect with them, help refer them to resources was really helpful. One thing I really like about remote advising is the screen sharing option. So that's been really helpful to be able to actually show students, okay, this is how you put in a request in Teradata for, which we call the student portal, for a financial hardship, I-20. This is how you submit a change of status. Let's look at the USCIS website together. So using some of those sort of teaching approaches worked really well in clarifying complex processes for students. So I would just say, I think it's really important to maintain connections with students and let them know that we're still here to support them, even if we don't have all the answers. You know, I sent a lot of email responses to students and had conversations with them after July 6th happened. I don't know exactly what this means. We're still clarifying this information, but we have your back. Clark is going to do everything we can to make sure that you can have a successful semester with us. So just sort of using that approach and that communication style, I think, is really helpful with helping students feel more comfortable.
There's something we kind of grappled with early on is how to communicate with students, how often, and what to communicate with them. It's these past 5 or so months have been funny because things have both changed so quickly and also time has moved so slowly at the same time. And especially early on as things were shutting down in Vermont, it was tricky to find the balance for students knowing that they were getting communications from elsewhere on campus. And so we, a couple of things, we asked our students, what is it that they need from us in terms of communication? And it just came up repeatedly, like we want to make sure that you're updating us. And so I made the decision that we would, through the summer, when we usually don't send that many communications, we will do an occasional standalone. We made the decision to do predictable newsletters. So every 2 weeks, we usually during the academic year, we do them every week on Mondays. And so we told students, you can count on an email from us every other Monday all summer long. And so it was both predictable, but we told the students what to predict. And I think that made a really big difference because we stopped getting so many emails from students on, have there been any updates on this? And instead, students were able to kind of anticipate, okay, I'll get more information. The other thing that was kind of fun for us as a staff to put together was that we got a lot of questions from students on, well, I'm staying in Burlington. You know, we had a big mass exodus, certainly, of students who went home, who went and stayed elsewhere in the United States, but we have a lot of students who stuck around Burlington and who were trying to figure out, how do I spend my time? What do I do? We had about 100 or so international students who stayed in the residence halls over the course of the summer, and it was really quiet. And so part of our communication for students was also offering up ideas of things that they could do, how they could spend their time. And so some of that might be kind of socially distanced activities they could do in Burlington while kind of following governor's orders, but also things they could do within their own residence halls. And so we'd get suggestions from students on occasion of, oh, this university offers online courses that are really great and come with a certificate. And then we included just some fun links for students that might be interesting. And we've had a lot of response from our summer newsletters, but I think that for the students I've talked to, they've appreciated kind of the consistency of communication more than anything. And I think that that's something that I initially was grappling with, of like, oh, well, we sent something 2 days ago. Does it feel too soon to send something else? But and so kind of coming up with a system for us allowed us to manage and kind of control what we were going to push out when, while also obviously July 6th kind of blew everything out of the water, and then we sent some additional communications. But the consistency and regularity in a time where there is very little consistency, I think was helpful for our staff and for our students.
A different form of communication that we've really utilized aside from emails is webinars. And we've been doing the webinars targeted to specific populations. We broke it out incoming students and continuing students, which has really helped because there's different concerns, right? And so I would definitely recommend, if you're thinking about doing webinars, to think about your audience. We started doing these after July 6th because we just couldn't keep up with all of the emails coming in. So we would answer students and let them know that these webinars were being set up. We would do 2 a week, one for new students, one for continuing students. Another thing that I think really helped is we had our assistant vice president deliver the webinar, which really, I think, gave students a sense that this was coming from an authority. So they didn't have to advisor shop and ask around. Also for the incoming students, that we had a lot of parents join us. So having somebody higher up in the office deliver the webinar was really helpful. Another thing that we did that was really helpful is while the webinar was being delivered, somebody would always be on the back end moderating the chat. So students and parents could put in questions in the chat. If it was an easy question, it was often me doing the chat. So I would just answer the question as it came up. If it was like a specific easy question, if it was a question that was coming up a lot, we would interject every few slides just to cover some of the questions. And finally, we would also record those webinars and post them on our website so we could direct students, hey, you have a lot of questions that were addressed in a webinar, you can watch the recording on our website. It really gave us somewhere to point the students that wasn't like dense study in the States information or a dense email with a lot of overwhelming information. So it gave us another resource to point students in the direction.
I want to talk about creating community over Zoom and about how I ran my new student orientation this year. I have a new student orientation kind of plan in my mind that I've used for a long time now, where I do some icebreakers, I do immigration check-in, I give F1 information, you know, maintaining your F1 status. I get some academic information, I get resources about the campus and an introduction to our campus for students. And clearly that's not what students need this year. So instead, I moved my orientation almost fully over to Teams with pre-recorded videos, PowerPoint videos where students could click some links and watch them again and again. And I moved a lot of the more technical stuff over there. So information about campus resources, information about maintaining your F1 status, things that students can watch over and over again. Because we have some new students who are back home, they can't get their visas right now. We have some students who are transferring in and staying in the US, some students who are transferring in and they're probably gonna go home. We have students everywhere. And since we have a small population, it didn't make sense to give this message to them as a big group or to break them out into groups that would really be too small. So instead, I moved that information over to Teams. And I did a couple of Zoom meetings, one at 8 a.m. and one at 8 p.m. to capture students in all time zones, where it was mostly just an icebreaker and a chance to talk. And I had more students attend than RSVP'd, which surprised me. And you know, it was pretty, my icebreakers were pretty simple. There were some polls for students to answer and to chat about. There was a Zoom scavenger hunt where we found things in our immediate vicinity to show to the camera. And I had 2 current students there to kind of facilitate conversation student to student. But students engaged. They chatted with each other with the chat feature. They all played these games. They came together and they talked and they had fun. And I don't think that this was the be all end all of Zoom meetings, but I think it speaks to a need that students have for this type of event. Students were clearly wanting and needing community and needing this type of interaction. And it made me think, how am I going to build this out in the fall semester? This can't be a one-time event. If I had new students come and participate, this needs to be for all students, and this needs to happen again and again. And I think creating that community was easier than I thought, simply because this is something students want. This is something students need. This is something that we can all do. And I encourage everybody to have these kind of small groups. I had about 15 students in each, just to say hi to each other.
Okay, we're gonna move on to office support and communication. this was a real challenge for me, to be completely transparent. I was coming in to a new team, a new leadership role, and I only had about 8 weeks with my staff before we dispersed across the state to our home offices. So what took a lot of trial and error for me was figuring out how often to meet and for how long. So how can we move the office along, meet our institutional mandate, serve students, and also still work as a team, but from a distance. So we started off meeting every day, which sounds like a lot. We did 30-minute check-ins right at the beginning of the day. And part of this was because we were in hardcore Teradata implementation. So there was just constant fast work that needed to be done. And I also felt that I didn't know my team enough at that point to let them go, you know, for longer periods of time, which could have been my own issue, to be perfectly honest. And so it took some time for me to figure out how we can work as a team without sort of encroaching on that really valuable, productive time that everyone in a team needs, right? We've all had those days where it's 9 to 5 Zoom, and then, you know, there's pressure to get your email done or work on a project after hours. So how can you balance that? And I got some feedback from my team like, hey, we don't need to meet so much anymore. And I responded to that. So now we're down to just meeting twice a week. We do one full hour meeting with an agenda with projects that we're moving along. And then we do a shorter check-in at the end of the week. And then I meet one-on-one with everyone in my team as well, so that I can answer their questions and see how they're doing on the tasks that they're working on. So that seems to be working well. We'll see how it goes in the fall. And I think, as with everything this year, just being flexible and willing to try different approaches is really helpful. And not feeling like a failure or that you messed up because you need to try something new, and acknowledging something might not be working is perfectly okay.
We too have been struggling with how often should we meet, what kind of meetings should we be having. So something that we started to do in the very beginning, mostly just to keep everybody on the same page, were stand-up meetings. So quick meetings that were targeted to specific needs, just to keep everybody on the same page. In the beginning, we were having them twice a week. Now we just have them if something comes up or if there's confusion about something. For example, we had one a couple days ago about what to do with students who want to arrive very, very late. So we were talking about that specific issue. So we're using them to try to prevent meetings from filling up every hour of every day, so people can't process things or answer emails, or meet with students or eat or use the bathroom or things like that. So it's been really successful for staff to know, hey, there's a stand-up later this week. I'm gonna suggest that we talk about this, or hey, we haven't talked about this particular issue. I'm gonna suggest that we have a stand-up about it. So that's been really helpful. Sometimes it's about something we know is coming, like how are we gonna handle deferrals for students who are not academically deferring, but deferring their start date. Or sometimes it could be something that has come up and is fast moving and changing, for example, the SEVP guidance during the month of July. And sometimes it's just to recalibrate, like, hey, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. We're gonna have a stand-up this week. Please send us any questions you might have. So it's been really successful and a great opportunity to get the whole staff together to answer some of the questions that have been circulating around the office.
And we've had kind of similar questions to what Susanna and Shannon have been thinking about, is like, when do you meet and for what purposes? One thing we started really at the very beginning was that I scheduled 15-minute daily huddles at 8:30 in the morning. And they were at the beginning really serving the purpose of what are people working on today as we kind of figure out how it is that we're working from home and students are gone. And so it was very task oriented. It is still that, but they've kind of really grown to serve a different purpose, which is to help keep a sense of team. You know, I think so much that's lost from working from home for many of us, if we like our coworkers, and I certainly love the team that I work with right now, is seeing people. And so the team huddles have really served that purpose, that every morning we start with getting to connect with one another. And so it's a way to kind of talk about maybe something that came up in a shared office email and who's going to handle it and how do we handle that. So we get through some kind of troubleshooting together, but also just again, it's similar to the emails that I was talking about before. The predictability is we know that every day we will see everyone who's in the office that morning. And that we did that just by team. So that the International Student Scholar and Employee Services team, the Study Abroad team does something similar. The other thing we did early on that was kind of separate from huddles was that we scheduled coffee breaks. And those were, again, at the beginning, they were 3 times a week for 30 minutes, which might feel like a lot of time, but again, it was an investment in recognizing that this is really hard for people and having a little bit of a pause during the day. I think that one thing that can happen, you know, when you're in the office, you might go and you heat up tea and then you chat with someone who's in that break space. And so you get that kind of human connection. But I think that sometimes when we're working at home, it can be really just focused on our screens all day and our email inboxes. And so the coffee break was almost to try and replicate the type of like water cooler chat that happens normally. And we've kind of, those have ebbed and flowed over the time that we've been gone. But they've also served the purpose of kind of bringing the whole staff, so across the the inbound and the outbound teams together. And then as we kind of look forward, I mean, we know we're in this for the long haul, right? And some of us will be on campus, but it's going to be on a rotating basis. We're not going to have that kind of team space where we're all together. And so one thing that we've done for the fall is we basically assigned almost like team spirit people by month. And so in September, a joint kind of project for 2 people is to come up with something to bring the staff together in a little bit more low key of a way than kind of an actual agenda. And that rotates, and part of that is just everyone having buy-in that if we are to be a team, everyone needs to kind of contribute to that team. And then that also gives people the flexibility to kind of organize something that would bring them joy, right? And so if Laura and Susanna and I are on a team, maybe they have different ways of kind of wanting to connect with others, and giving each person or each kind of dyad of people a month allows people to bring their own creativity forward to that. So we're trying to kind of help people feel connected even though they're in physically different spaces.
And I'll talk quickly about being a single person office at this time. It's very challenging, and it can feel very, very isolating. Before the pandemic, I actually never felt like I was a single person office because, well, I am the only person that does international student advising, the only person that does FM regulatory issues. I work on a team with some other people in the Global Education Center, but because of the pandemic and because of our staffing shortages, my coworkers have been temporarily reassigned. And so now I really do feel like I am a single person. And I really have to reach out to other people and ask for help and stay connected more than I ever have before, because I'm missing, like Emma was saying, those natural meetings that happen when you work in a space together, right? You go and you get tea and you get coffee and you chat about what is going on. And so it's been helpful to definitely keep up with the NAPSA listservs and see what other issues schools are seeing, to reach out to my coworkers and say, hey, you know, in our student information system, I want to track this, but there's no box for this. So I go to institutional research and I have them help me figure out where I can save information. And to have these meetings over Zoom or over Teams is really helpful to keep that connection. I upped the meetings that I have with my supervisor from once a month to once every 2 weeks, just so I can make sure that I'm not just isolating myself, that I'm making sure that I'm accountable to myself for keeping on track and moving forward. But it can definitely be a challenge for those of us who really are kind of, well, we're the only ones that do what we do.
And in typical fashion, we are crunching in some work-life balance right here at the end of the session. I do want to acknowledge that a lot of our perspectives, the panelists were all mothers. And so a lot of this comes from that place of, you know, taking care of our kids. So not all of this I hope for those of you with different family situations, you're able to take something away from this slide. So for me, when I asked my partner what I should talk about for this slide, he told me that I should stay silent because I don't have work-life balance. And I could definitely stand to grow here. But I will say one thing I think I'm fairly good at is I am self-reflective, so I do know when I need something, and I can recognize that I'm feeling stressed or I'm feeling anxious. And just being able to advocate for myself has been really important, because I think as caregivers, we're always giving to other people and thinking about what other people are doing the emotional labor for the family. And so sometimes I have to say, no, I'm leaving you with all the kids and I'm going for a walk by myself, or I'm gonna do yoga out in the yard and don't let anyone talk to me. And I think doing that and saying, this is what I need, and being okay with that is really important, because we have so many demands on us right now. And all those demands are converging in the home. We're here all the time, and it can really build up if we're not being careful. So that's my perspective on work-life balance.
I agree with that. I like to tell my team, do as I say, not as I do, because my work-life balance is certainly a work in progress. But I am actively working on having a better work-life balance. So my 2 cents here is I wanted to just encourage everybody to be really transparent right now. Like, this is not normal. What we are dealing with is not normal. And it doesn't help anybody to have a stiff upper lip and pretend it's fine. So I think just transparency is so important right now. Be transparent about your struggle. Like, others are feeling it too, and by you speaking your feelings and putting it out there, you could be giving permission to others to speak out as well. People who might be afraid to say, hey, I'm really struggling right now and I need some space, or I need some help. I need somebody to think through some solutions with me. And maybe they're afraid to say it. So, like, please lead through example and talk about those things with your team. Life is going on around us while we're working, and work is seeping into all hours and aspects of our lives in our homes and in our families. So if you need to step away or be offline for a period of time, like, just be transparent about it. I know my supervisor has been really, has really encouraged me to do that. Just let her know, hey, I need to be offline for a half an hour to go pick up my kids at camp, or whatever it may be. I let my team know that, that I'll be offline for a few minutes and I'll be back. And it really sets a good example for other people to be transparent about their needs as well. My next point, I'm saying to myself as much as everybody else, like, please take your lunch. I never took my lunch in the office either. I always ate at my desk while I was working, but now more than ever, it is so important to make sure you're eating. There have been weeks where I have gone all day until dinner time without eating because I was too busy and too engrossed in what I was doing, and it's not good. So definitely block off the time on your calendar to take your lunch. Block off the times that you're not able to take a meeting because of family obligations. Use your calendar to make sure that you're scheduling time to do work on a project. If you have a deadline coming up for a project, block off some time, because if you don't block off that time, someone else might slide in with a meeting. And if your calendar looks free, people might not realize how busy you actually are. So I've definitely been utilizing my calendar quite a bit so people can see, oh, Tuesday, Shannon's really busy. I'm not going to ask for a meeting on Tuesday. I'll ask for a different day.
And Shannon, I agree so much about being transparent about what you're going through. I've been trying to think about this time as a way of what my ideas of working and being a mom are, and what society's ideas are, and how they aren't working right now. I have 3-year-old toddlers, twins, and they're at home all day, and my husband's at home all day, and so am I, and we take turns working and watching the kids throughout the day. And I am trying to be incredibly upfront about this. So when somebody says, oh, can you hop on this meeting at 10? I have to say, oh no, I can't, I'm watching my kids. My kids are at home all day. And I want people to know that, because work doesn't exist in a vacuum. And whether you are a parent or not, you have lives, and lives are challenging right now. And I think that we all need to be really honest about that. And I think that I really struggle with the fact that most days I do childcare from 9 a.m. till 2 p.m. and then I work in the evenings. And sometimes I have so much guilt and anxiety that, like, at 2 o'clock, I can barely open my email. I'm so worried about what's going to be there. And honestly, it's, you know, it's a few hours worth of emails. But every single day when it's time to open my email, I'm like, oh God, I haven't looked at my email yet today. Or even worse, I look at it and I try to watch my kids at the same time, and that doesn't go well. Either the email gets responded to poorly or my kids do something terrible. So I try to be really open and honest about what I'm going through, but also I try to give myself a little bit of grace, which is hard. I feel bad about it. But I was in a meeting the other day with another woman who's a mother who's working from home with a very young baby, and the baby kept crying during the meeting, and she kept apologizing. And I thought, that's horrible that she even thinks she has to apologize, because this is life and it happens, and it's totally okay for there to be a crying baby in this meeting. Like, it's fine. I don't want to blink an eye, and I've been there too. And so I'm trying to give myself some grace, because if I were her, I wouldn't want to feel bad about that. And I shouldn't feel bad about what I have to do every day to make things work. But also I'm trying to be a little more understanding of when other people don't write me back, or when their answers are not what I expected. In the past, I would have been really frustrated if somebody took 5 days to write me back with a half response. And now I'm trying to think, you know what? They've got lives. There's something else going on. I need to be patient, because I'm asking other people to be patient with me. And so that's what I'm trying to focus on these days.
And I'll maybe build on that a little bit. I think for me, some of the pandemic has also just really helped shed light, I think, on the things that I care the most about, and places that I want to give my energy and places I don't want to give my energy. And so it's been like a little bit of this recalibration process for me. I'm also the most recent mother of the 4 panelists. So I have a 10-month-old at home. And until 2 weeks ago, we were living in a 500 square foot apartment. And so setting boundaries was really challenging. We just moved into a place that I have a mini closet that is my tiny, tiny office. So I'm able to actually close the door. But something that's been interesting for me is that I have found that it's by working from home, I've like reached the saturation level of work that can be at home. And at 5 o'clock, I'm done. There are exceptions to that in cases of true emergencies, but it's been this really interesting thing for me. There's at least one person on this call that I've worked with in the same office in the past who knows that I've had really, really bad boundaries in the past. remember when I was on my maternity leave, I was emailing a whole bunch, and there's something about the work physically coming into my home for 40 hours plus a week that's kind of helping me say, you know what, there's probably nothing right now that is so important that I need to be focusing on that when I've been giving it all of my time during the week. And so it's been a little bit of an adjustment for me that's, I think, been a positive one. I think the other thing that's really made a huge difference in my attitude, frankly, this summer is using my vacation time. And so taking some long weekends. I know initially I thought, well, I'm going to accrue all this time because what am I going to do? There's nowhere to go. And the concept of a staycation has never really been a thing for me. And I feel like that has become real and important for me as a way, again, to kind of find a little bit of distance, because I feel like I enjoy my home in a really different way when I've been working it usually. And then on this day, I get to stay and not work and not turn on my computer. And so I think the other big thing for me with kind of thinking about work-life balance is just similar to what Laura said, is just remembering we are all living in a pandemic, right? And so we are trying to work in a pandemic, work from home in a pandemic, be parents during a pandemic, be partners during a pandemic, whatever your circumstances are, we're trying to be human beings during a pandemic. And so just, again, giving ourselves a little bit of grace, and then finding the silver linings in all of it. I think that I feel incredibly grateful that I've been able to witness way more moments in my 10-month-old's development since I went back to work, and then about 8 weeks later, things shut down from my maternity leave. And so I've seen a lot more of his first year, which has been really, really wonderful. And so I think for myself, reminding myself of what are all the things that I'm really grateful for in this, because those, again, give me energy that I can show up as a better version of myself, despite all the circumstances.
So we've got a couple of minutes here to address some of the questions in the chat. Molly, do you want to make a few selections?
So it's actually been a lot of recommendation sharing and, you know, just people responding to things that you're offering and offering support. So we don't have any big questions quite yet. We can wait for a minute a lot of people are saying thank you for a great session. But people could also put their questions into your breakout rooms as well if you want to do that. Yeah. Oh, here's a question from Carrie. So when you're all back in the office, what will you do differently? That's a good question.
Remain paperless.
I'm going to take my lunch is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my lunchtime, take a coffee break now and then, and not feel guilty about it. And be really upfront about, I'm leaving now, so I'll answer any emails in the morning. I think just like Emma said, I'm getting better at setting boundaries because it's so much, the stakes are so high right now. So I'm getting a lot better at it. So I imagine when I get back into the office, I hope to carry over my new attitude on setting boundaries.
And I would just say, sorry, Emma, go ahead.
I really love the chat feature that we've been using in Microsoft Teams, but I know it exists in a bunch of other spaces as well. And it's something I wish we had used for years because it's really helpful sometimes when we're all booked up. So that's just a technology thing I know that will carry forward. I suspect we'll also carry forward some semblance of a team huddle that's kind of a quick touch base in person, maybe in, you know, a dream world, not too without masks. But we shall see. But yeah, just technologically, the chat function has been a really great addition that I think will continue. I think we'll also continue offering remote advising for students who want it. I think it's been super helpful for a lot of students where zipping across campus to our offices just takes up a little bit too much time.
Yeah, I don't think work is going to go back to being the same. And I think, you know, I will be an advocate to my supervisors, you know, to see if we can keep some of the flexibility and, you know, look at if it's possible to have a few days where staff can work from home. I have a long commute and it's been really great, actually. Some of this experience has been really wonderful, just to have more flexibility to actually have time to cook dinner, have some time with my kids because I'm not commuting as much. So I hope that's something that we can retain when things go back to a little bit more normalcy.
That's the only question that's in the chat currently. So we can wait for one more minute, but then we can put you all into your breakout rooms. So if you have last minute questions, you can throw them in the chat now.
And then otherwise, grab something to eat if you want. And if you haven't, rename yourself to one of the 4 discussion topics that we're offering.
Great. So what I will do, I will go ahead and open the rooms in just a moment. I will stay back in this main session. So if you want to start with technology and then pop into office, you can just leave your breakout room, come back to this main session, and I can reassign you and put you into rooms. We will keep them open until 12:30, and I'll send a little reminder to all of you to let you know when rooms are about to close if conversations are still going strong. But I will go ahead and open all rooms now. So you'll just need to click thank you, and just a big thank you to all of our panelists. So thank you very much. You guys were great. This was a fantastic session. And the recording will be available shortly online, and I'll send it out in our Friday email. All right, I'm going to open the rooms now. So you should get a pop-up.